This episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity. You are listening to episode 37 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast with today's guest, Rachel East, co-founder of Clarity on Fire. Rachel shares openly that she has no desire to build an empire, crush it, or be a girl boss. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mother of 3, a yoga teacher, and a consultant for yoga teachers. This podcast was inspired by the first time I left a yoga teacher training. I made some amazing connections in that first 200 hour. I was held accountable to really dig into my own yoga practice. I was learning so much about myself and the real roots of yoga. And when we graduated, we really talked about how we were going to get together and continue with this journey as a group, as a collective. But in reality, we all went off to our own lives, our own homes, and our own yoga classes. And we never did have that monthly group meeting like we said we were going to. In my own experience of becoming a yoga entrepreneur, I felt like I was alone in the wilderness. I was still working on learning a lot about yoga and then had all of the business side of things thrown at me as well. I was away from the constant feed of knowledge, the motivation to practice, and this learning and growing in this supportive community of yoga teachers. And so fast forward to today, it's over 11 years now since my first yoga teacher training ended, and I still have a lot of questions. This podcast is a place for me to ask those questions, and I wanted to share it out with the other yoga teachers in the world so that you can travel from your workshops, your trainings, your classes, and take this with you on the go and hear the answers and form your own questions. I'm so excited to share this episode of the podcast with you today. For anyone who has ever questioned, what are my passions? What does success look like to me? How can I form some healthier boundaries? I think you're going to really take a lot away when you get to meet Rachel. And in talking with different yoga students and yoga teachers over the last week, I wanted to share a little bit of what I'm hearing and what I'm learning, a couple of personal stories. So I'm hearing from some of you that growing a business on a big, huge scale and really crushing it, building this empire, growing bigger is not really for you. And so I love that Rachel looks at this with a whole different perspective. Also, if you're ever feeling like you're looking around at other yogis, yoga entrepreneurs, and you feel like you need to be doing more, selling more, marketing more, creating more, just take a deep breath and sit back, get a tea, and enjoy today's episode. Rachel kind of goes against the rules in this, and I really appreciate someone's perspective when they're going against the rest of the flow. As a young girl, I know I did this to my own mom. On Sundays, we used to go to church, and Mom was always adamant that I needed to wear a dress and dress up and look fancy. And I had hit a point in my life where dressing up for me meant sewing on my own patches to my blue jeans that were very ripped and really making a statement with my clothing. And so I challenged my mom on a Sunday morning, as I often did, and we ended up going to church. I can't remember what I ended up wearing, but at the end of the service, I went up to the minister. My mom was within earshot near me, and I asked the minister if God loved me no matter what I wore. Well, I'm sure all of you can guess the answer. The minister assured me that it didn't matter what I was wearing, and from then on, my mom never challenged what I was wearing to church. So that's my own little rebel story. I would love to hear yours if you want to share a comment in the show notes or share it in our Facebook group for yoga teachers. If you're wondering how you can find that group for yoga teachers, go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, our website, and you'll see the join button right on our homepage. We would love to hear from you in there. In our Facebook group for yoga teachers, the Connected Yoga Teacher group, it's called. It's a really safe and inclusive place. There's lots of information. For example, Holly asked a question this week. She asked, when you attend a new yoga class as a student, do you tell the instructor that you are also a yoga teacher? If so, before or after class? And there was a huge thread of response. Thank you to all of you who responded. Pete said, I'm about to attend a yoga class while I'm on holiday, and I was thinking if I should mention that I'm a yoga teacher. After reading the comments, I'm going to keep quiet and enjoy the experience. Jamie said, I never tell them I'm a teacher because when I'm in their class, I'm not. It feels so good to put myself in the hands of a teacher and not be one. So this is an idea of what it kind of feels like, what the vibe is like in the Connected Yoga Teacher. We invite all different perspectives for sure, and we do it in a really safe and supportive way so that we're helping each other along. We have enough challenges as yoga teachers. We don't need more. Today's podcast episode was actually inspired by a question in the Facebook group. So Julia Kafazov, who we heard from in episode 17, where she talked about how she really helps yoga students who are dealing with chronic pain, I still have so many bits of that interview that I use in my own yoga classes. So I will put a link to that in our show notes. But what I want to share about this, how we take a question and then I make a podcast episode out of it, is that you can do the same thing. If you decide that you would like to create an online community or some way of really connecting with your students, a Facebook group is a great way to do this. Now, that's only one example, and I actually talked about it in a podcast interview with Amanda King-Smith of MBOM. I'm a big fan of Amanda's podcast. It was an honor to share, and I will put a link. It just went out this week. I will put a link to that in our show notes. And I really talk about how to create this online community, and I broke it down and made a PDF for all of the listeners. So if you're thinking, you know what, I want to have this Facebook group where I can talk to my yoga students or talk to the yoga teachers or whatever group you're working with and hear their questions, hear their comments, and create your content based on that, this is a great PDF. And I'm happy to share that and see little groups pop up all over. Before we dive in and hear from Rachel, here is Eric of Schedulicity with our hot tip of the week.
Hello, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Eric with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Some tools for small business entrepreneurs expect you to be ready for everything the second you sign up. But just like improving fitness and flexibility, building a business can take time. If you're ruling the world or just moonlighting on the side, you can select only the options you actually need and use. We also make it easy to schedule personal time. Once your schedule is set up, you can add personal time in just a few clicks to block off lunch breaks, coffee breaks, last-minute errands, or time for self-care. Any break you need, anytime you need it.
Thank you so much for that, Eric. It's so fun to get to hear from all of the Schedulicity team because I often am typing to you guys with different questions, and so it's so fun to hear your voices. If you, the listener, our Connected Yoga Teacher listeners, would like to get to know the Schedulicity team a little bit more, ask questions, hang out, have fun together, and be entered in 2 amazing prize draws, this is the big news that I had a hard time holding back last week. We are organizing we're calling it a fireside chat. You'll have to bring your own fire and popcorn and hot chocolate. But we will be there on Wednesday, November 29th. This is 2017. If you're listening to this later, I'm sorry, it's past. But if you're listening to it before Wednesday, November 29th, 2017, we're going to meet at 12 p.m. Eastern Time or 10 a.m. Mountain Time. When you show up live for the fireside chat, you're automatically entered in for our amazing prizes into the draw. There's 2 different draws. So I'm giving away a free consultation call, and Schedulicity is giving away a lifetime subscription. I'm really excited that one of our Connected Yoga Teacher listeners gets to win that. So that'll be really fun. So again, Wednesday, November 29th, 2017. And most important, the Schedulicity team is going to show up to answer any and all questions that you have about online scheduling. So I'm excited and we'll see you there. It'll be fun to also see everyone in person. So let's dive in and hear from Rachel East, who is a certified professional coach. She co-founded Clarity on Fire with her business partner and her best friend, Kristen Walker. And they really wanted to create something that was based on their own experiences with their mind-numbing, unfulfilling work. Those are their own words. And they had this unwillingness to accept the status quo. So this going against the grain. And I really appreciate that. Their mission is to provide clarity and inspiration to people who know what they don't want in work and in life, but have no idea what they'd rather be doing. So if you feel that way, you're going to get a lot of great insight today with Rachel. They created this passion profile quiz, and this is one of the things that really drew me to their work. It's a free online resource which has helped more than 200,000 people to pinpoint the intersection between their passion and their career. And so I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that passion profile quiz, and you'll hear Rachel talk a little bit more about that. Okay, let's dive in and hear why Rachel says she doesn't need to be a #girlboss. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Rachel. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited about this.
Me too. I am super excited because today we're going to talk about something that's been in the back of my mind, but then was really brought forward by some of our Connected Yoga Teacher group members. Specifically, Julia asked this question. But before we even dive into the topic of do you need to be a girl boss, I just want to ask you a few questions. So
yeah,
first of all, tell us about the work that you do and kind of what landed you in that.
I and my business partner / best friend from college are life and career coaches for, I like to say, people who know what they don't want, but have no idea what they would rather be doing. And the reason I landed on that language is because that was my experience for so long. And oh God, I graduated college it feels like forever ago. I guess it's less than 10 years ago. But I think that I suffered from a lot of the same struggles that so many of us struggle with. You know, I grew up being told to pursue things I was good at. And so I majored in something in college, communication and public relations that fit into my strengths, but that I didn't necessarily care about.
Right.
And so I ended up graduating and needing a job, and I graduated during a time where it was a couple of years after 2008. So I needed a job, and there was that really fear, scarcity mindset around getting any kind of job. So I took the first job I could get. And I was doing events and promotions coordination for an investment firm, which sounds way more fun than it actually was. It was just planning retirement seminars for older people. It was not enjoyable or invigorating, and I didn't care about it at all. I didn't feel like I was making any kind of an impact or difference. And, I was just here because this was the only thing I was barely qualified to do as a 22-year-old. So I had a lot of education, from that point on in knowing what I didn't want. I could be very articulate about what I didn't want to do and what I didn't like. I didn't like the restriction and the lack of freedom and the lack of autonomy I had over my own life and my own creativity. I had to basically be where someone told me to be between 9 and 5. I had to do the work that someone was telling me to do. It didn't really matter if I didn't care about it. And that just did not sit well with me. And so I'd always been interested in self-development. And I didn't even know coaching was a thing at that point, but I was really interested in therapy and potentially going back and becoming a therapist. So it was through looking into therapy that I discovered coaching and the differences between those two things. And so my best friend and I, we're always sort of on the same path in life. I think we have some sort of, I don't know. I like to say that we have a lot of karma or something because we've clearly been together many, many, many times before. And anyway, she and I were always on the same page, and we decided that coaching was more of a fit. And so we went back and got our coaching certification about 5 years ago now. So that's the sort of, in a nutshell, even that was kind of a long answer. That's in a nutshell how I got from point A to point B, but there was a lot more that went on between those points.
Yeah. Well, I love it. That's the quick version. And I've heard you on different podcasts. The first place that I heard you was on the Courage and Clarity podcast with Steph Browder.
That was fun.
And what really resonated with me was this exactly: who know what they don't want, but what they'd rather be doing. And also that you just kind of touched on, the need to not be building an empire or be the girl boss or be crushing it every day. And I was like, wait a second, no one else is saying that. So then in our group, Julia had posted and she said, if I'm not playing big, am I contracting? Am I selling myself short? I also think it's valuable to talk about what passion and fulfillment really mean, because I believe we have some assumptions that unless you're pushing, expanding, and growing, then you're somehow not passionate enough. So I was like, I know who to ask this question to.
I love it. I'm so glad you thought of me when you had this question, because this is the perfect question, and I'm so glad I get to answer it for your listeners. Well, really, there's really two different questions going on there. There's the one about what is passion and fulfillment, and what does it mean to live a passionate, fulfilled life? And then there's also, is it, if you're not expanding, are you contracting?
Right.
So I'm going to start with, are you, the expansion contraction issue, because I think that's actually a shorter answer than the passion fulfillment question.
Okay.
But I think that absolutely not. I really hate the idea that that we should always be growing and getting bigger and doing more. And I'm of the mind that you don't have to be doing anything productive in order to feel like you're still worthy and that your life has value. And I think we have this holdover pattern it could come from anywhere, but from our parents, from schooling, where we really get taught to earn points and to get good grades, and that our worth very much becomes attached to what we can produce and what we can achieve and deliver. And we get so bought into that system, and often we're not getting contrary, unless our parents are really conscious people. Often, even though they might not mean for us to be walking away from our childhood with that interpretation, that's the interpretation we end up getting, between the ages of 0 and 18, right. Is that what you do is what makes you valuable and what you can produce and achieve. So that's why I end up coaching so many perfectionists who are burnout, and so many people who really feel bought into this system, and they don't love how they feel, but they're really afraid of what other people think. They're afraid to do anything sort of different or take a risk, because, that's not going to earn them point, or that's not going, that's going to be frowned upon, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So we get really bought into this system of needing to always do in order to feel like we're worthy, in order to feel like our existence has value. And I just have never been the kind of person who wanted to be doing a lot. There are people like that. There are people who have Energizer bunnies who they want to be crushing it and killing it all day long. And I've coached those people. And when it's authentic, the energy is very real and it's very tangible, and they can just work a mile a minute and they don't really get exhausted. But me, oh my God, if I work more than a few hours sometimes, I'm just done. I've always enjoyed a slower pace. And I just don't understand why, working a little bit can't be just as valuable as working a lot. And I also think that sometimes we need that base of doing very little, or of being in between. I think it was Nancy Levin on a podcast, I don't know which one, who said, honor the space between no longer and not yet. We need the space to sort of not know what we're doing and to figure it out, and to be kind of testing which direction we're going to go in. And our society often does not value the contraction. Right? The space where nothing is happening. Kate Northrup, another business person and podcast and blogger and entrepreneur that I really love, calls that the fertile void. That a lot can happen when you're doing nothing, and a lot can happen when you're not actually producing all the time. So I think there's just as much value in contraction and doing less than there is in always doing more. I'm a big quality over quantity person. So that's a really long answer.
That was a really good answer, though. I love how you say that it's this. I think you're right. It's coming from school, parent, look, you did a good job, all the way up to now with social media, looking at what everyone else is doing. Oh my gosh, they're doing that. I mean, nobody's posting, look, I'm just sitting here for days. I'm stuck. No one's posting
exactly.
Writer's block. Usually not very often anyway. So.
Yeah, I just the whole crushing it, killing it thing, it exhausts me. And I really often wonder at the authenticity of that for a lot of people. That often we say that because we think we should, but that secretly a lot of us just would like to be able to do less, or like to be able to maybe have a smaller impact than we think we should. But we worry that unless we're affecting many people as we possibly can, that somehow we're not doing enough. And I think that's a very personal, deeply personal, very singular type of question where the answer is going to be different for every type of person, and every type of person should be allowed to answer that question in the way that suits their value system. So for some people, like, success is going to mean impacting millions of people. Marie Forleo was a great example of that. And then for other people, like, having a one-on-one impact with a few people a year can be really fulfilling if you can sort of drop the fear that that's not good enough. Often the desire to influence tons of people or make a huge impact or be constantly crushing it is really only a belief that that's what we have to do and that's how this works, and you're not a success unless you don't. So I would really encourage people to redefine what success actually means to you, and to drop the shame around not necessarily living up to someone else's definition of success.
So with that, what comes to mind right away is a yoga class size. For a yoga teacher, they might see that they have 5 people sign up for their class, and then they might look at a social media post where someone has 40 people in their class, and they're like, well, obviously I'm not building my business enough. But the person with 40 people in their class might be making close to the same income with the person with 5 or 6 people in their class if they've put their prices out there and they're right.
Yes, it totally depends on how you define success. So if you're only defining it one way, like numbers, just sheer class size, then I imagine, you are going to feel ashamed if that's the only way you're defining success. But, for example, I'm obviously not a yoga teacher, but I do yoga. And I went to yoga the other day, and the class where it was at capacity. It's a pretty big studio, but it was like 50 people, and we were crammed in there. And I hated it, to be honest. Right. I mean, I'm sure the teacher felt great that there were a lot of people in her class, but there was no personal attention, obviously. And it felt rushed, and it felt cramped, and it didn't feel very good to me. And I walked out saying, I really love the other class I typically go to where it's like 10 people. So, because I feel like you get more instruction, and you get more one-on-one attention, and you get to make, like, the teacher gets to make a more personal impact on people. And I think that should at least be another facet of how someone defines success is, how many people am I impacting? And it can be 40 or it can be 5. It just depends on your preference. And I'm sure there's a lot of other facets of how a yoga teacher would define success beyond class size. I'm just not an expert in that, but I bet you
also, if they define, like, can I do a handstand,
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
There's the whole Instagram is one that makes me scroll through and be like,
oh, yeah.
Oh, wow, I can't do any of those things, yet I teach people every day.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. I haven't thought about this because obviously I follow people who do yoga on Instagram, but I'm not a yoga teacher, so I'm not following probably nearly as many yogis as you are. And I can only imagine the kinds of pictures you guys are running into.
Oh, yeah.
People doing crazy postures on beaches with their hair blown out, right? Like I can only imagine how glamorous it looks and how much shame there probably is when you're just when you're comparing your everyday life to someone's glamorized, filtered, airbrushed, posed pictures on Instagram. Like, that's awful.
And I think there's also something like I follow a few yoga teachers and I'm just like, yes, I love this, that they don't look perfect or they share that they're not feeling perfect. Those are the ones that I really resonate with the most.
Yeah. I love that people are cluing into the idea that being honest and being real is what is so much more impactful and so much more powerful and resonates with people 10 times more than the sort of posturing that gets done.
Right.
And what's interesting is I also have noticed that there's this sort of tangent, but there's this what I've heard called vulnerability now happening, where people have caught on to the fact that being honest and transparent sells, and so now they're sort of being fakely honest. Does that make sense? Have you seen that happening?
Well,
yeah, they're like being sort of vulnerable, but not really. But you can tell they're doing it to get clicks or to get people to buy their stuff, and so it's hard because you have to use your discernment to get clear on who's being real for real and who's being real for money. funny. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, although I had never heard of it and had never thought that someone would be doing that. But I get what you mean.
You're going to see it now that I pointed it out.
When you put this out there, because you were being honest and real about this, like, I don't want to be a girl. Was this scary did you write a blog post first? Is that how it started?
Yeah, so I wrote, no, it wasn't scary because I didn't think anyone would care. Yeah, so I wrote it actually turned out to be the most popular blog post we've ever done, I think. And it's called, I think it's called Confession, I Have No Desire to Be a Girl Boss.
Right.
And I didn't feel particularly afraid because I didn't really think my audience was girl bosses. I just didn't really know what else to write about that week. And I was feeling like that. And I've always been a truth teller, so I'll just sort of say what I'm thinking or write what I'm thinking. And, our audience is more just like everyday people, not necessarily business owners or entrepreneurs, but it ended up really resonating with people across the board. And I just didn't think anyone would care. So it's really funny that sometimes when you just I didn't have an agenda. And I think that's maybe sometimes the difference between being honest and being vulnerable, just purely, and then being honest and vulnerable to get people to buy something from you, is that when you don't have an agenda, that can be very obvious. And also when you have an agenda, that can be kind of obvious. Mm-hmm. So no, I just wanted to tell the truth. I wanted to talk about how I was feeling. And in that blog post, I was just feeling really burnout and tired of getting this message that we should always be killing it and crushing it and working from what seemingly felt like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. And that if I didn't always love running a business, that somehow made me a bad business person, or that I wasn't dedicated enough or committed enough to what I was doing. And I was just really in this mood to start questioning, well, what does dedication mean? Because I think I can be really invested in something and only do it 3 hours a day. Like, who said that that's what the dedication has to mean, putting in really long hours? What if I just do a really quality job in a shorter period of time? Like, how are you going to argue? Like, who's going to argue with me on that? I feel like, who made the rules? I've been asking that question my whole life. Like, who made the rules about this stuff?
That is good. I bet your parents would be like, yeah, she's been questioning this all her whole life.
Oh my gosh, I would not. Yeah, they would absolutely say that. They would probably roll their, it's one of those things where they're both, I think they're proud, but they're also disgruntled at the same time that I was constantly questioning the rules.
You're like, who made these rules? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love it. And I love that if there are parents out there listening, just know that then if you have someone who's questioning, they're going to question their peers, and then they're going to question the systems. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's sad to me to see kids who do question things get shamed, or, they try to stuff them back in their paw. Mm-hmm. And I think it's such a it's such a valuable thing to have a kid who asks those deep questions and doesn't get shut down, because it just means they're inquisitive. It means they're curious. It means, they're probably innovative, because they're just wondering, why does it have to be this way? And if they're encouraged, they will probably come up with better ways to do things.
Right. I think this is also a great message for parents to give to their kids. Like, there's this time I'm going to do. The only way we can actually give this message to our kids is if we stop doing. And my daughter even said to me at summer vacation now, and she said, Mom, when does your workday end? And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get a podcast out. So whenever I get that done. But her question is really good. Like, when does my workday end? Because if I worked a 9 to 5, that's when it would end.
Boundaries, right? Like, when you own your own business, it's very easy to have zero boundaries around your work, because your work and your life are so integrated that you can be working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. if you want to be. And sometimes that can work, and sometimes that's really not healthy. And so I think just because you can does not mean that you should. And it's different for all of us, but I've had to get very clear on how my energy tends to flow, so that I can put sort of like loving boundaries around my time, so that I don't end up burning myself out. And that's what happens when you feel like you should be in a constant state of expansion, is you tend to have no boundaries. So you'll tend to just give away your time left and right, or, schedule a call or a class when you really know that that's not the best time for you to be coaching or teaching or whatever. And, I think it's, if part of success, the definition of success, to get back to that, I think has to be how you feel, like physically and mentally and emotionally. And if you're making time for yourself beyond just your business.
Yes. I think that's so good. I do talk to a lot of people who are like, well, I love my business. My business is my life. And I think, really?
So, yeah, about that.
Yeah, dive into that.
Yeah, I think that your business is one aspect of your life. And oh, I love this. Okay. So I tell this to people about their job. I mean, I tend to coach more so people who have jobs and people who might want to become an entrepreneur. But some people who just don't like their job and want to be doing something else, they want to be employed somewhere else. They don't necessarily want to start their own business. So I coach a mix of people. So what I tend to tell people is that your job or your business should not be like the fountain of all fulfillment. It shouldn't be the place where you constantly go to get all of your happiness delivered to you. If you think about this in terms of maybe a romantic relationship, that's called codependence. When you expect somebody, right, to like be your source of happiness and to meet all of your needs. That is literal codependence. So I think a lot of us are codependent with our jobs and our businesses. And, we don't necessarily want to be too independent because that can mean we're not relying on other people or asking for help or support enough. So we need to find a place of interdependence in relationships or with our jobs or with our businesses. And so what that looks like in my mind is that it's okay if a big chunk of your fulfillment comes from your work. It should, because you spend so much time in your life and in your day working, right? I mean, if you have a standard 9-to-5 job, which is not necessarily most of your audience, but if you tend to work, 40 hours a week, you're going to be doing that way more often than you even see your own spouse and kids sometimes.
Right.
So it obviously you want to be doing something that you feel really good about and that lights you up the vast majority of the time. But you should absolutely have other sources of fulfillment and happiness. And if you don't, I think that's an indication that you probably need to amp up and look into the other aspects of your life that are probably lacking or atrophying, because it's sort of like having an arm where you're doing all of the bicep curls and you're ignoring the other arm. Like you've got one little sort of atrophied
right.
skinny little arm, and then you've got this crazy bicep, and it's not balanced. It's not healthy.
What a great analogy, this whole thing, because it is like a relationship.
What else is it? Like, we have a relationship with everything in our life, with our parents, with our spouse, with our kids, with our job, with our business. I mean, it might not be a person, but you definitely have a relationship with it nonetheless. So it needs to be a healthy one. And in healthy relationships, there are boundaries.
I think also what you're getting into is like the relationship with our job is not the relationship to self.
No, those are two very different things.
That is big.
Yeah, exactly.
That is really good. Ooh.
Yeah, it's Brene. Well, so Brene Brown says, who you are and what you do are two completely separate things. And that is one of the things I live by, and I teach all of my clients, and I try to remember every day. I get a lot of people coming to me saying, I failed and that makes me a failure. Or I snapped and I said something really mean to my mom. I'm a bad daughter. And the first thing you have to do is say, no. You failed, but you are still a worthwhile, successful human being. Mm-hmm. One mistake or one failure does not make you a failure. And saying something mean to your mom does not make you a bad daughter. You can be a bad daughter who says a mean thing and feels bad about it. That's totally allowed. So yes, this is so applicable to our work in the world that it might be an expression of who you are, but it's just one expression of who you are. And if you didn't have it anymore, you might mourn it and you might be sad and you might feel bereft. And that would be normal, especially if you love what you do, but it wouldn't be the death of who you are. Right. Because who you are is not. So, okay, this actually leads really well into how I define passion.
Okay, good.
So I have had that in the back of my mind the whole time. I knew we were going there. So I'm glad it sort of happened. So I define passion as sort of the set of underlying values that you're really deeply attracted to and that make you unique and make you who you are. So for me, I'll use me as an example because that's easiest. I really, really value, I value a lot of things, but I really value freedom, like in all of the ways. I don't want anyone to tell me what to do with my time.
Right.
I want to be able to have my own creative autonomy about the work that I do in the world. I want to have a flexible schedule. And so I couldn't necessarily do what I do right now. Even if I did the same thing, I couldn't do it in an office because I would hate that. I would hate the lack of freedom that would, it would just take so much freedom away from me, and I would hate that. Right. So I really value freedom. And I really value consciousness and self-awareness and helping people to find truth. And I have more, but those are good enough for now. And those things have expressed itself, even just the consciousness thing has expressed itself in so many different ways just in the past like 5 or 10 years of my life. I mean, I have wanted to be an archaeologist. I've wanted to be an FBI profiler. Like I'm like sort of weirdly fascinated with serial killers. I've wanted to be when I was younger, I wanted to be a lawyer and I wanted to be a journalist. And you would think that a lot of these things don't have much in common. But when you sort of zoom out, what you realize is that all of that has a lot to do with human behavior and conscious, and sort of what it gets down to is truth and consciousness and understanding the human mind. Mm-hmm. And so what some of those things lacked, though, was freedom.
Right.
So right now, coaching is sort of the current manifestation of my values and the things that I'm interested in. And what's cool is that very likely in another 5 or 10 years, it could evolve again just based on me and my evolution. Because I'm not always going to value the exact same things in the exact same way. And my life circumstances are not always going to be the same. Like right now, I'm not married and I don't have kids, but I do intend to do both of those things at some point in the next decade. So I know that because my life circumstances are going to change, that the way my passion gets expressed in the world could change right along with it. And instead of being afraid of that, I'm okay with that. Because my passion isn't a thing. It's not coaching. It's the self-awareness and it's the consciousness and it's the freedom and it's the truth and all of that. And so if it ends up evolving into another sort of manifestation, that's fine, because you're not going to take my passion away from me. You really can't. That's sort of part of who I am. It's wired into me.
Right.
And so, I think that often is a relief to people, because we get sort of cultured to believe very mistakenly that your passion is something that you can sort of label, or it fits nicely on a resume, like it's doctor or a lawyer or, a yoga teacher, right? And if you can't do that for some reason, or if you sort of burn out, or if you're not interested in it anymore, you're afraid that, like, does that mean I'm not a passionate person?
Exactly. I think that is so helpful. And there's also this sense of like, you're not grasping and holding on to something also, like even when you're talking about your coaching. Yeah. And I know from just seeing your stuff online and listening to you speak that this is really part of your passion. Like it's fueled by your passion, what's happening right now, but you're not holding on. You've got your hands open, like that's there for now. And then maybe something else will come in.
I have no idea what's going to happen. And there are days when I'm sort of, I'm human too. So there are days when I'm like, okay, that would be really scary to not have clarity on fire anymore. But I trust that at that time, if that were to happen, I would have a really clear idea of what it is I would want to do next, or at least I would have an indication of what direction I wanted to move in. And I'll just trust the future me to figure it out. And I'm just going to sort of allow this to be the current manifestation. And what happens later it's not really my business at this point in time. Like it's not, I don't need to figure that out.
Right. Because even if you sat down and tried to figure it out, it would change anyway.
Well, a lot of my people too, the people I coach, they really feel like they have to pick something and stick to it for like ever or 40 years. So that's a really big pressure point for anyone to have, to feel like I've got to pick something and I can't ever deviate from that and I can't ever fall out of love with it. That's really scary. And so a lot of people, it puts them in this sort of purgatory where they feel like they can't choose because it's so high stakes. So I like to lower the stakes for people.
That is so good. Even if I'm thinking of the yoga teachers that I work with when we go to pick a type of yoga. So for example, I used to be really into teaching prenatal, postnatal fertility yoga, and then that evolved. And now I teach yoga for pelvic health, which still I touch into those same spots with prenatal, fertility, postnatal, but it's evolved, like you said. And I don't know that I will teach it forever either. Right now, I feel like, oh yeah, this is the spot. This is what I love to be doing when I'm teaching.
Yeah. I can almost guarantee that you won't always do this. Because I just have a feeling that at some point you're going to be like, I know everything there is to know about the pelvis and I'm ready to move to the clavicle or something, like you're just gonna, something else is going to start calling you. And I think that's natural. We are meant to change and grow and evolve. And if what we are passionate about is not allowed to evolve with us, then that's messed up. That's broken.
Yeah. I have a question now. How do you know the difference then between this not needing to be a girl boss, like taking that time to contract a little bit or rest a little bit between things or not have to crush it every day, the difference between that and being afraid to put yourself out there?
Well, I think, this is a hard question. So this is really the difference between intuition and fear. And okay, so one of the things I like to do with my clients when they don't know whether something is authentic or whether they're just avoiding it out of fear is, what would you do if no one would know about it? Like, if you could put yourself into a space where you were allowed to do anything you wanted to do and there would be no bad consequences and no shame whatsoever, and no one would really even have to know, what would you do? So for me, I was not always so confident about doing less. I used to definitely have hangups around why is it that I don't want to do more and there must be something wrong with me. And for me, it was like, you're lazy. And so if I had answered that question a few years ago, I would have said, well, I would just do less and it would be so great. And I would just not feel the need to grow social media or figure out Facebook ads. I just don't care. And I just really wish I could be allowed not to care. And it'd be so great if I didn't have to care. That was an honest answer. That was what I really wanted. I was just afraid of how it would look and that I wasn't, quote unquote, allowed to do that. So I sort of wonder, what your audience would think about just putting themselves in it can be hard to imagine that, but putting yourself in like a blank white room or something where there are no consequences and no one's going to know. Like, what would you honestly do?
Right.
And I guarantee you, everyone would come up with an answer in that space.
Yeah. I forget which podcast I was listening to, and this guy, he was working at a 9-to-5 job. It's the white on rice. It's like the origami. I don't know if you know this account on Instagram.
No.
But he just, like, what he really loved to do was make origami shapes. So then he started doing that and posting them on Instagram. That's literally his job now.
I mean, for God's sake, right? Like, if he can do that, then you can work 2 hours less in a day. Or, I just imagine that it would be sort of like being in a circle. Like, I've never been to an AA meeting, but where everyone just sort of confesses, their deepest shame or their darkest secrets. Like, I think we should all go around in a circle being like, hi, I'm Rachel. And what I really secretly want that I don't want anybody to know is that I don't want to work so much. And I don't care if I don't impact that many people's lives because I just want to be able to stop working at 5 so that I can make dinner and hang out with my dog.
Right.
But we're so afraid to tell the truth because for whatever reason, we're afraid that's not allowed. And so wherever I can, I like to dole out permission.
That's nice.
Permission to just be who you are and want what you want and to not feel ashamed about it and to not feel like you have to constantly compare who you are and what you want and what feels good to you to what feels good to somebody else. It doesn't have to be the same.
Yeah. And that's so good for yoga teachers out there or anyone in the health and wellness because they're constantly giving. If they're constantly giving and not taking that time to contract and pause and, be out in nature or away from a computer or not posting crazy poses on Instagram, they burn out quickly. Yeah. To give you an example, I just gave up on focusing on social media. We just rarely post anymore. And that should be anxiety and quote unquote should be anxiety inducing for an entrepreneur. But it doesn't really affect me in any way. Because I have other ways of genuinely attracting people to us that feel better to me. I love having these types of conversations and this helps people find us. Mm-hmm. And, we have a quiz that attracts a lot of people to our site. And I've just sort of given myself permission to do the things to get the word out there that feel good to me and to let go of the rest. Yeah. I actually wanted to bring up the quiz. So do you want to tell our listeners about it? Because I'll put a link to it in our show notes.
Yeah, so it's called the Passion Profile Quiz, and you can either, link to the show notes, or you can, just do clarityonfire.com, and you'll find it's right there on the homepage. So this quiz is really short. It's 11 questions. It takes less than 2 minutes, and you get one of 4 results. And the whole theory around passion profiles is that, well, let me dial it back and say that I think a lot of us focus way too much on what our passion is and not necessarily how we're meant to be expressing it. So we're very focused on what am I going to do and what is it going to look like and should I be a photographer? Should I be a yoga teacher? Should I be a coach? Or should I go back to school? And we're very focused on the content. And we rarely think about the context of how we're doing it. So to go back to the example I gave earlier, the content of what I do could be very much the same, but if I were employed by someone like internally as a coach, I would hate it. And it's not because of what I'm doing, it's because of how I'm doing it. I really value freedom. So the quiz is a way we came up with to measure how people are meant to combine their career and their passion. And when you understand the how, it makes the what so much easier to then pursue. Because there are a lot of opportunities that aren't going to be relevant to you if you really value freedom, for example. Like a lot of traditional jobs are no longer going to be something you need to be focused on. Mm-hmm. You might need to be focused more on entrepreneurship. Yeah. Or on the other hand, if you get a different result, you might value connection above everything else, which means working remotely for 40 hours a week might be insanity for you.
Right.
So if you can understand sort of your big values around time, how you want to be spending your time, and that can mean, whether you want a flexible schedule, whether you want a ton of freedom, whether you really like the 9 to 5 and you just like clocking in and clocking out, that's fine. But you need to understand how you value time. You need to understand how you value money, because some people really don't like having a limit on how much money they can earn, or, people saying this is how much money you're allowed to make and no more. That's annoying to a lot of people, myself included.
Right.
I'd like to be able to decide how much money I make. Other people are like, great, I want to get a paycheck every 2 weeks and not think about it. I don't want to worry about where the money comes from. That is so stressful. And then you also need to understand your value around passion. And so for some, getting paid to do work we're passionate about feels like a no-brainer. Like, who wouldn't want that? But there's a whole subset of people who actually do not want that. They feel that combining their work and passion robs the thing they're passionate of its intrinsic value and its fun. And I've seen this happen to so many people where they just really want to have a 9 to 5 job and do the thing they're passionate about on the side, but then they go try to make that thing their full-time job, and it's so stressful and they hate it because they feel like they have to perform. They can't just do it for fun anymore.
Right.
So you have to understand your values around time, money, and passion so that you can figure out the context of how you're meant to, combine the thing you care about and the way you work in a way that works for you. And then once you get clear on that value system, then it's so much easier to fill in and kind of connect the dots and get more specific about what you're then meant to pursue. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I'm excited. I remember when I took the quiz and I was like, ooh, this is cool. I mean, I kind of knew where it was going right away.
Oh, you figured it out. I'm sure you did.
We joke around here because I'm like, oh, I should work there and then improve their systems. And my partner always says to me, yeah, like you could work for anyone else. And I'm okay owning it now, but it used to be, I did have jobs where I worked for someone else, but the ones that really worked well were the ones that were saying, here, you set up all the systems and we'll just do what you say.
Right. Exactly where you had the most freedom and autonomy. So what I want to say about this is that a lot of the time, if you don't realize that you're in the wrong passion profile for the jobs that you've been pursuing, then you will feel like something is perpetually broken and you won't understand what's wrong. And you will probably start to blame it on yourself. You'll probably start to think, well, I'm just broken and I just will never like working. And this is just how it is and I have to accept it. And that's really demoralizing. And what's true like 80 or 90% of the time is that if you feel like you constantly are trying to find something and never really feel like anything fits and you're job hopping and you're just burnout or if you feel really stuck, very often this is one of the problems. What I like to compare this to is like if you're trying to do a job or, be employed in some way that's going against your passion profile, it's like trying to paddle upstream. You can do it, but it'll take about 10 times as long and about 10 times as much energy as if you were, on the other hand, going with the current and allowing it to carry you in a lot of ways. So for me, this, even though I have to figure out where money's going to come from, even though there's a lot of risk and uncertainty inherent in what I do, this expends a lot less energy and time for me than having to commute and go to a 9 to 5 job.
Right.
To me, that is like the paddling uphill.
Right. And for others, it's great for our yoga teachers listening to see that it could be the exact flip, that a 9 to 5 job can sometimes offer that. And there are those jobs in the yoga world as well,
Yeah. There's probably so many ways to combine yoga with your passion profile. Like, I am confident of that because yoga can be done anywhere, anyhow. And, if you're the kind of person who doesn't really want to combine your passion with your work, and now you're hearing this and you're afraid you can't be a yoga teacher anymore, it's totally not right. You can have a stable job that then sort of becomes the support mechanism for your passion. And it allows you to just show up and have fun and be engaged and be of service without having to, worry about the business side of it and the marketing side of it. And that's one of the more difficult things I found about being a business person, is that you think you're going to do it and you're going to have, so much time to be doing the thing you actually signed up for. And you realize so much of it is just keeping the thing afloat and doing the administrative tasks and doing the marketing and doing the business building and all of that. And it leaves you a lot less time to do the thing you care about. Now, for me, I say that's worth it, but for other people, that might not be worth it. And that's totally okay. You're allowed to just say, I don't want to worry about where the money comes from. And I just want to show up and teach. Mm-hmm. That's totally allowed.
Yeah. I like that you've given our teacher listeners some freedom and just, you don't have to fit in this one box. No. Today's call has been amazing timing because I just got off a call with just another business peer, not in the yoga world, and she kind of asked me a few questions about my email list. And I was like, well, I have X amount of numbers on my email list. And she was like, that's not big enough. You need to be, and like this whole funnel. And then she said, what email program are you using? I said, I'm using MailChimp. She just said, when you grow bigger, you'll get a bigger, and automatically I thought, I'm talking to Rachel next.
Yeah.
And it brought up all kinds of red flags. And I know that I actually do this to other people on the other side, because in the consulting work that I do, I push their boundaries a little bit. Like, try this, do a live video, do a, market this way. So
that is such a good, so this is reminding me of last year when Kristen and I signed up to work with a very pricey, like 5-figure business coach. And the reason is because I was tired of doing a lot of the business stuff myself. And a lot of being a business person is like throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. Mm-hmm. And I was tired of that. Like, I wanted a little bit more clarity and certainty around what to do and what not to do. And I really liked this coach. She was great. Like, I really liked her as a person. But what I paid a lot of money to find out is that she didn't really fully understand my values around time, money, and passion. And I had to try to explain it to her. But she wasn't familiar with the whole passion profile thing. And, a lot of the time people are treating you like a fire starter, for example. And we named that after Danielle Laporte, who wrote the great book, The Fire Starter Sessions. Like, those are the people who are really, really entrepreneurial. They're like racehorses. Like, they want to run, they want to go fast, they want to try a million things. They have so much energy and passion, and they just want to pour themselves into what they do. And that's allowed if that's who you are. But I'm a little bit of that, but I'm also weirdly, because you can have sort of a secondary profile, I'm like half that, and I'm half a thriver, which is unfortunately the person who doesn't want to combine their passion with their job. So I have a very interesting push-pull between wanting to combine my passion with my work and not wanting to at all. So what I've had to figure out is that for me, that means I have to work less. I have to have stronger boundaries around my work and my life so that I can feel like I am living almost more than I'm working. And for me, that's how I'm wired, and that's what works for me. But she didn't really understand that. And so it felt kind of hard because I constantly felt like I had to push back against that, because it's like she was treating me like a pure fire starter, and I don't blame her, but that's not me. Yeah. And so I think, it is really important not only when you're working with a client or you're consulting or when you're working with a business coach, but just when you're giving any other person business advice, like, to remember that they might not have the same values around the way that they work as you do. Yeah. And that's a conversation that's often completely lacking. Yeah. In a lot of circles.
That's so true. I love how you brought in the boundaries here. I feel like that brings, for myself, it brings a lot of feelings of being liberated when I set these limits. For example, some teachers are like, well, I'm going to teach 12 to 16 classes a week. And I said, I'm going to teach one group class a week and maximum 5 private classes a week. And that's it.
Yeah. I met a teacher once. She was like yoga and Pilates. And so she did like, at least 2 different kinds of classes, if not more. And she was like, I teach like 21 classes a week. And my jaw like dropped because that sounds like a part-time job. Like it sounds like, well, it's only 20 hours a week as opposed to a 40-hour-a-week job. But I understand that is, to me, that's like working 80 hours. Like that sounds to me like working 80 hours a week. That sounded insane. But you know what? She was an Energizer bunny.
Yes.
And she loved it. And I was like, don't you get tired? Because I'm an introvert and being around people that often, I'm like befuddled by how that could energize her. But it did.
Right.
But for me, I used to do 15 or 16 coaching calls a week, like a couple years back. And I was like near dead. I was so tired. And I didn't have any boundaries around it because I just thought, well, I need to build my business. And this is what I should be doing in order to build my business. And I was doing a lot of like complimentary calls at the time. Mm-hmm. So I was coaching clients and doing free calls, and it was just too much. So what I had to realize, I had to like really stop ignoring my body and my mental and emotional state and figure out, okay, at what point do I start to get resentful of what I'm doing and burnout? Right. And I realized that it's when I get into double digits. If I can do 8 or 9 calls a week, I'm okay. If I get to 10 or more, I'm not okay. And a lot of the time we're completely ignoring our intuition or our like physical, emotional, cues because we don't feel like it's reasonable, quote unquote, to do less. And I think that's complete BS because if you burn yourself out, you're not going to be doing very high quality work. You're not going to have enough energy the next day to do what it requires to not only like get on the phone with someone or get up in front of a class and teach, but build your business and do the activities and the things it requires to, keep yourself like moving forward and making progress. So I think that quality is always going to produce you better results than quantity. And you got to stop ignoring how you feel.
Yeah.
Like just bottom line, period. Stop ignoring how you feel.
That is
and set
so
boundaries
good.
based on that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that because I think we can get caught up in the numbers. Like how many classes do we teach?
Yeah.
How many consultation or coaching calls do we have? Or, how many people do we have on our email list? So instead you're asking us to tap into how am I feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to know what? You probably felt great about how many people were on your email list, or you felt fine. And then that lady came in and maybe not purposely, but sort of made you feel bad about it.
Well, I was actually thinking in the back of my mind, yeah, but I had, a third of my list signed up for my last course. So it's working.
See, that's insane. Like a 30% conversion rate is insane.
Yeah.
Like any business coach will tell you, especially as your list gets really big, they'll tell you like having 1% of people sign up is normal. Mm-hmm. So, again, one definition of success is so limited. You've got to have like so many different facets of what success looks like. And that's just another great example of it.
Yes.
Even with metrics, like those are both metrics, but you need to consider both of them.
Yes.
Before you deem yourself a failure. I've done that too. Oh my gosh, I've done that too. Like when we've had, like I once, the first time we ever launched something, I wanted 100 people to sign up for it. There was like 400 people on our list. So it didn't really occur to me that probably wasn't realistic. So we had 20 people sign up and I was devastated.
Right.
I just thought I was such a failure. And then when I went back and I looked at the conversion numbers compared to like when our list got really big later on, like we converted more people then than we do now. Mm-hmm. And that's because when you have a smaller list, you often have a more engaged audience,
yes.
So it's funny that I was just beating myself up so much. And yet in a way I was doing better then than I am now.
Yeah. So what the yoga teachers out there are like, oh my gosh, I don't even have an email list. I call my students every Wednesday and tell them about the new session.
That's nice.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like a personal touch. I've never even had a yoga teacher do that to me.
There you go. I remember I used to call my students. That was like back before big email lists. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need an email list.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's like almost sacrilegious to say because everyone would tell me I was wrong, but one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten when it comes to business building was from my trainer the coach trainer we had. And she just said, just get known for what you do. That's it. And it doesn't matter how you get known. If that's networking in person, that's fine. You can build a really, really thriving business. And I have seen people do it without a website and without business cards and without a social media presence. So obviously you can have those things if you want to, but getting known the way that feels good to you, that's really what matters more. And not necessarily doing things that you feel like you should be doing to get known that aren't super aligned with who you are. Like as an introvert, I hate networking. Like I hate it. So I don't do it.
Right.
Like I just don't do it. It doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel aligned with who I am. And I realize that the quality of people I'm going to attract when I'm doing something I hate is not great.
Right.
So I'm going to try to do things I enjoy, like this. This is the perfect introvert activity. And trust that because I'm happy doing this, people are probably going to resonate with me much more than if I'm awkwardly exchanging business cards at one of those meet and greet things.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, because I feel like you've just you can throw away all the rules and
Yep.
who made those rules and
made them anyway.
make your own rules. Yeah. As my friend Lindsay says, do whatever you want all the time.
That's a great mantra. That's pretty much all as long as you're not hurting anybody, or like being a huge burden on somebody else, then why not?
I know.
Like, who cares? Anyway.
She's the sweetest people pleaser there is. So for her to say that is so cute.
Well, maybe she's like, it's aspirational,
Yep.
Like I got to say it if I'm going to do it.
That's right. All right. Well, this has been amazing. There is so much here for our listeners. And I think that we should actually start a thread on this when this episode launches in the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. And I'll add you in there so that people can ask you questions about this as we go.
I'm not on Facebook anymore. It looks like I'm on Facebook.
Right.
Because I didn't actually go in and delete or did whatever my profile. But I stopped logging in like October of 2015 because I just was done with social.
What's the best way?
You can totally, we're on Instagram, like at Clarity on Fire.
Okay.
I'm there. But if you want to tag Kristen in anything, you're free to tag her because she's on Facebook and she'll tell me what's going on. Right. So, you can feel free to reach us either of those places. And we still have our business Facebook page.
Yeah.
So if you can add a business to a Facebook group, I'm not sure you can do that. But
I can tag you guys in it for sure. I can tag your business.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do that.
Yeah, Kristen will let me know when it's happening. I know. That's a totally side tangent we could go on about, like getting personally disconnected so that you can connect in the real world with people. That's something I'm really into these days.
That is cool.
Totally different conversation for a different day. But that's why I'm not on Facebook.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all of this. That gives us all a little more clarity and freedom to just say we're throwing out the rules.
You are so welcome. This has been great. I can't wait to hear what people think of this.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alrighty, Connected Yoga Teachers, thank you for tuning in today and taking an interest in this. Thank you also to Rachel. Wow, I listened to each episode a couple of times by the time I go through and jot some things down and make up my show notes, and I found so much in this episode to take away. If you like this episode, you may also want to tune into the episode that I did with Pooja Madan. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, because in that we talk about beginning and end of day rituals. And I have to just share that this morning, it's morning here while I'm recording this, I like to do the podcast recording earlier in the morning now. And so I popped upstairs to have breakfast with my kids and say goodbye. And I was kind of like rushed. And then I said, I need to find a way to be able to do this in the middle of the day while you guys are at school. And my son turned to me and he was like, yes, you do. And he's calling me on it. He's calling me on setting these healthy boundaries. So I have set the healthy boundary of not doing this late at night, which became a bit of a habit. But if I have one key takeaway from this episode today with Rachel, it was really setting some of those limits. So I also set some limits around the yoga classes that I teach in a week, and it's now at 5. So I teach up to 4 private yoga classes and 1 group class, and that's all on one day. And that might seem overwhelming to some, but it really works for me. And I do that one day of yoga. I've really time blocked that, and that's my limit. Another key takeaway that I really want to emphasize again is that Rachel said something about wanting to have a job that feels amazing to do, but not wanting your career to be your only source of fulfillment. And this was so evident this past weekend. Sean and I got away for a couple of days of hiking. Now, when I say a couple of days of hiking, it was just 2 hours each day, but it felt like a real holiday. So it doesn't have to be an extended time, but I would love to invite you to see, like, what does success look like to you? For me, success really looks like getting my work done in the week so that we can take off for two hours of hiking together. And it also looked like doing that while the kids were at school. So it's kind of like we have a day off that's not the weekend, because weekends are still really busy in our house with kids, but just time away for us. So ask yourself this week, what is success to you? How can you nurture yourself a little bit more? How can you do less? How can you embrace that pause, that fertile void, the time between doing something and then doing something new? Rachel shared the quote by Nancy Levin, honor the space between no longer and not yet. So I'm going to write this quote out this week. I have a little board in my office here. Find some way to remind yourself of a key takeaway for you in this episode. And if you'd like to share it in our private Facebook group or in the show notes comments, that would be amazing. So the links again are there. If you decide you want to work further with Rachel, she offers different courses, coaching, and one-on-one work in different capacities. And the website is clarityonfire.com. The link will be there. And I also talked about the White on Rice Instagram account, so I put a link to that as well. I'm a big fan of that one. And again, the passion profile quiz and a few of the other podcasts that I talked about. If you are wanting to work with me further, my one-on-one consultation calls are back up. I have a few more spaces, and you can look for that on my website. Just click on Work With Me. There are also courses coming up there. The next live in-person course is the Mama Nurture Prenatal Yoga Teacher Training, which teaches you how to lead fertility, prenatal, postnatal, birthing, and Baby and Me classes and workshops. So it is all-encompassing. I co-lead this with Kim from London, and the dates of that are in 2018. It's the spring, April 13th, 14th, 15th, May 4th, 5th, 6th, June 8th, 9th, 10th. And if you want more information about this amazing training, it's happening in Meaford, Ontario, thanks to Beth Ruddy and her studio. And you can go to mamanurture.ca, and I'm going to put this up on our Connected Yoga Teacher page as well soon. It'll be there under courses because that's the next time to connect with me live. I would love to see you guys there if you have any interest at all in teaching pregnant women. I have a review here to share from Sylvia of Hatha Yoga. Sylvia is from the United States, and she says, cannot recommend this podcast enough. The quality of experts is absolutely excellent, and the conversation always honest, clear, to the point, making tangible links from theory to practice and executables. Even the episodes that from the title didn't seem of too relevant to my particular practice in business have some gems of knowledge and inspiration. Thank you, Shannon Crow, for creating this amazing tool for us to feel connected, keep learning, challenging what we know, and find inspiration to keep pushing through the lows of yoga business. Thank you, Sylvia. I love that you brought in this to keep pushing through the lows, because we all hit those lows no matter what we're doing. Even though we might love yoga and love being an entrepreneur, we all hit those lows. And I'm glad that you also said that you're finding some tangible things, some actionable steps. That really is my entire mission here, is to help yoga teachers along with the information and then actionable steps. Okay, Connected Yoga Teachers, it was wonderful to spend some time with you. Thank you for listening today. You really are making a difference in your community, and I am happy to be here behind the scenes supporting you to do so. Stay connected to self, to your practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.